It's Platt, and today we try a beer that's a collaboration between the King of Beers and the King of Bourbon. That's next to Platt's Beer of the Week. The particular beer we have today is the Budweiser Black Lager. It is a collaboration between Budweiser, also known as the King of Beers, and Jim Beam, the largest bourbon seller in the world, or some may say the King of Bourbons. I know this is a beer from a big brewery, and a lot in the craft beer community don't like these types of beer, but I'm not a beer snob. I just want to find good beer. This is something I've seen in the liquor store for a while, so I thought, what the heck, let's give it a try. Normally I'll do some kind of background on the brewery itself, but enough people know enough about Budweiser or Anheuser-Busch. I'm going to skip that, but I'm going to read a few little fun facts about Anheuser-Busch Budweiser that you may or may not know. The founder of the brewery, or the person we know to find the brewery, Eberhard Anheuser, actually was not a brewer. He was a soap merchant there in St. Louis. Ended up coming about owning a brewery because the original owners of the brewery had defaulted on a loan, and he picked it up, you know, in default. Luckily for him, though, fun fact number 2, his son-in-law, Adolphus Busch, was a brewer. And he was the one that kind of took over the brewery that Eberhard had. And luckily, he was able to come up with a beer recipe to save the brewery. He worked with a gentleman named Carl Conrad, who had tried Bohemian-style Czech Pilsners before, and they'd worked on some recipes that ended up producing the Budweiser we know today. But if it wasn't for that collaboration, there might not have been the Budweiser we know. Speaking of Budweiser, in certain parts of the EU, Budweiser is just known as Bud. And that's because in the Czech Republic, there's a brewery that predates by quite a bit Anheuser-Busch called Budweiser, or they made a beer called Budweiser with a V instead of the W. And they lay claim to that name in parts of the EU. So over there, they'll refer to Budweiser as just plain Bud. Also, that same brewery refers to their beer as the Beer of Kings, and Budweiser's always called itself the King of Beers. So again, a little back and forth between the two. One definitely influenced the other, but as far as the naming rights things, that's for the court to decide. Fun fact number 4 is Budweiser is actually the largest purchaser of rice in the U.S. In these large breweries, they will use something called adjuncts to add more fermentable sugars, but kind of drop the cost of beer, because 2-row and 6-row barley is not cheap, but you can find other grains. You might know the Bud Light commercials a while back. They were claiming that Coors and Miller were using corn syrup or whatever. Budweiser's adjunct is rice, and they're the largest, like I said, the largest buyer in the U.S. Fun fact number 5, Bud at one time in 1983 had its own video game, a game called Tapper. And I've actually played the game before, and it's kind of fun. Instead of a joystick, it has like a tap handle, and you'll have an empty mug, and you fill the mug, you'll slide it down the bar to different patrons, and I think you clean the bar. There's like 4 or 5 bars. You run back between the different bars, pouring beers. For someone who bartends for a living, actually is kind of a fun game. If you find some old retro video game parlor or whatever, keep an eye out for that. And last but not least, fun fact number 6, Budweiser, or Anheuser-Busch, maintains a herd of over 250 Clydesdales. The Budweiser Clydesdales are iconic as the name Bud, the Beechwood aging, the label. It's just part of their lore. And they have several of these Clydesdale teams that go out, ride around, do promotions, stuff like that. And their herd of over 250 is one of the largest Clydesdale herds in the world. So I thought that was kind of interesting. Well, before we try this beer, let's check out the stats. I said earlier in this video, this is a collaboration between Budweiser and Jim Beam. This is actually the second collaboration between the two. They've done a beer a year earlier to celebrate the 85th repeal or 85th anniversary of the repeal of Prohibition. That was the Budweiser Reserve Copper Lager. Kind of was a little hit, or they at least found that they got enough positive response they decided to do it again. So this is the second edition. This is for the 86th anniversary of the repeal of Prohibition, which again makes sense. Two iconic American brands that lived through Prohibition, so it just makes sense they would come together. This is not regular Budweiser just thrown in a different bottle or what have you. Regular Budweiser comes in at 5% alcohol. This is 7.1. So they've had to bump the grain bill. Maybe it's additional adjuncts, maybe it's additional barley, what have you, but they did tweak the grain bill for this. This has been aged in 6-year-old Jim Beam bourbon barrels. You're going to pick up just a little bit of that oak, a little bit of that wood. Jim Beam barrels generally have a nice little char, so you'll get that. Some people must say, well, wait a minute, Budweiser uses beechwood aging. That flavor profile should be in there anyway. Beechwood aging is not for picking up the wood notes. It's more for a kind of a filtration of the beer or whatever. But you don't really pick up, some oak or, out of the beechwood or whatever. Where here, these Jim Beam barrels, they're designed to impart flavor, and that's what you're going to get here. Also, this is a black lager, so you're going to have just a different grain bill just to get to that color. You're going to have some chocolate malts, some black patent malts, and those are going to impart different flavors. Some coffee, some chocolate, some caramel. So this is just a different beer. I mean, it's in the style of Budweiser, don't get me wrong. They still probably use some similar proprietary yeast or proprietary hops per se, but this is not just Budweiser thrown in a new bottle. Don't think of it like that. So let's give this beer a try. All right, pours nice and dark. We get a thin but light khaki head. Let's say this shade darker than like a Newcastle, what have you. Oh, wow. Plenty of malt on the nose. This is, yeah, almost in the vein, nose-wise. Does remind me of a brown ale on the nose. Let's give her a try. Oh, wow, that's nice. A little bit biscuit, I want to say, malt-wise. Definitely, I don't get much chocolate, but I do get some caramel. We do get those darker notes. Not getting much hops on there. The regular Budweiser's not a hoppy beer. Again, these lager style beers are tame. It's not overly sweet though, so the malt is there. But it's not over the top. It's dominant, but not over the top, I guess the best way to put it. But this is a nice drinkable beer. 7%. It's got a little body to it. It's definitely more substantial, slightly more viscous than a regular Budweiser. Definitely has more complexity. Slight, I don't want to say booziness, but there is a definite step up in the alcohol. Yeah, it just gets me to thinking a little bit about that bourbon barrel. It's not, I guess in a little way it is kind of like a Jim Beam, that a slightly mature whiskey, but it's not a 12 or 15-year-old whiskeys, that we're getting to now. Some of them Michter 10 years, stuff like that. This is just it kind of reminds me of Jim Beam, a whiskey of substance, a whiskey of some maturity. This beer is some substance, some maturity. Nice beer. I think they've done a solid job. Well, I hope you liked this video. If you did, please subscribe down below. Also, please like the video because it lets YouTube know we're putting out good content. If you have any questions, comments, concerns, or beers that you would like me to try, please leave them in the comment section, or you can always contact me on the Twitter page. Till next time, bottoms up.